Welcome to Paris Underground Radio. My name is Annette Deleu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. In today's episode, we are talking about astrology. And I know everybody is familiar with what sun sign they are. They're familiar with horoscopes and things like that. But we are going to dive really deep into what astrology is and how it can actually help you with forecasting your year or the next week or understanding the energies of what planets are affecting your life, like Mercury Retrograde. Today, we are interviewing Tamara Budrow, and she is one of the most fantastic astrologers I have ever met. And I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Annette. I'm so happy to be here. This is really exciting. I could talk about astrology all day.
Fantastic. Because I could listen to you talk about astrology all day long because it's not something that comes supernaturally to me. I love hearing you explain how things are affecting the energies and how it really connects with other things that we utilize, such as tarot cards and things like that, how it all kind of works together and combines together to create a full picture. I love that. I have had some experiences with astrology personally that have been pretty fantastic. I did get an astrology reading a long, long time ago. We're talking probably, 12 years ago now. And this reading was actually something that I didn't like. I got the reading and I realized that half the things this guy was saying, like they weren't even true. And he told me at one point, he's like, yeah, your business is going to be super successful until you are nearing 50. And then you're going to completely change careers and you're going to be focusing on spirituality. And at the time I was like, you are nuts. Like there's no possible way that that's going to be happening. And here we are. I can definitely say that getting astrology readings can really give you a nice temperature for what is going on. It can help you with your life trajectory and what you need to be focusing on at a particular time. So that was sort of how I got into astrology initially. And Tamara, I want to ask you, like, what was your first experience in astrology and what made you decide to start reading astrology?
I think like everyone, I grew up reading horoscopes and like as a young, I think a teen, that was entertaining for me. It was interesting. It was something to read. We didn't have iPhones back then. So I was just interested in the concept, but didn't take it very seriously or didn't really know that much about it until I learned about the moon sign, like actually getting the birth chart with the time of birth. And so I think I put that in online somewhere. And when I read my moon sign, I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, this finally something is telling me this part about myself. It's explaining this part about myself that I wasn't able to put into words. And for anyone who knows anything about astrology, I have a Scorpio moon. And so it's a bit intense. And that's what I was having trouble understanding as I was growing up and learning about myself and finding myself the old fashioned way. It kind of like accelerated this idea of this is this part of you. And it put it into words that I wasn't yet able to explain. And so having that felt like I wasn't alone. And it really like helped me to feel more included with other people, but also understand how there are other people like me, but also that there are people who are not like me. And so these things, when you're growing up as a teenager, like all these changes, they're very difficult, especially maybe social situations. And so this helped me understand the idea that we're just different. So it's not all about it's not a personal thing if you're not really meshing or getting along with someone, or if someone's not understanding you, right? Like you have to also understand yourself for that to sort of come into bloom. And then you can understand where other people are coming from. I began to use it as I started going through college because I moved far away from home. Actually being able to learn more about astrology helped me to understand, like immediately when I met someone and they told me they were a Leo, I'd be like, oh, okay. I was able to already just like come from a place where I could accept and understand what made them different. Like, how is a Leo different than Taurus because I'm a Taurus? And so that was just like the basic level of it. And I pretty much stuck with that for a while. And then I became kind of addicted to like learning about the moon sign and revealing that to people. So it kind of became a party trick as well. I would always end up at a party talking to at least someone and getting their birth time and talking about their moon sign and them just being blown away.
Amazing.
Yeah, because the moon sign is something even I didn't even recognize that in myself. And so when you're someone that this person just met and you're telling them these things about them that are like the hidden parts of them, they're like, what? How do you know that? And I'm like, I don't know that. I don't, like that's the beauty of it. I don't know it. I am just translating it. I am just delivering the message, And so I think I love to see the reaction. That's why I use that as a party trick. But it also helped me learn a lot about astrology just by doing that, right?
Right.
It really got really intense during COVID. So my work obviously changed and I was in confinement and I had just had like my spiritual awakening. So this whole time that I was using astrology in the past, it was not for spiritual purposes. It was kind of just more for fun. And it was more of a psychology thing, because I was always into psychology. Like when I was in high school and growing up, it was just to me another language of understanding the human psyche and behaviors and things like that. I was into it for that reason. But then when I had my spiritual awakening and I started having these experiences and saying, okay, like there's more to this. That's when I really I got a reading from someone, from an astrologer, which I had never done before, actually. Took tons of notes. I asked him actually what would be some great books for learning about it. And I just spent the whole time reading all these books and practicing my own chart and just like realizing like, oh my God, there are so many doors and layers to this. And I could just geek out on it for hours. And then I realized that the more I started doing that I was actually also just channeling information. So then it was unlocking again another layer, like, oh, this is also so much bigger than me too. That information is coming in that I'm not even buying or, like reading. Some of it is just clicking and it's all like making all these connections to tarot and all these other things that I'm also learning about at the same time. So it just kind of became an addiction. I would say, there you go, Scorpio moon and Taurus sun. So those are both fixed signs. So can get like a bit obsessed with it if it's super interesting and deep. I mean, that's Scorpio too. Anything that's intense and deep and meaningful, like that's what you're going to get hooked on. And so that's the part of astrology that I love the most. It's not about that reaction anymore, because I am a Gemini rising. So that's why I was using astrology as the party trick. I'm also ruled by Mercury, which is our higher conscious ray, which is connected to astrology. So it makes sense that I'm able to understand it so well, but I had to get that spiritual awakening to really find the deeper meaning of it and find that passion through what it can actually do for us, rather than just what kind of reaction it can bring out of people and the fun that it can be. So it can be so many different things, which I think is amazing, because it can really help you in a deep level, but it can also be really fun. And I think that's what's important in spirituality as well. You need both.
Absolutely. And I've talked about this before on this podcast about having fun, because sometimes with the spiritual journey and the spiritual awakening, we can have a tendency to be super serious about things. So having fun is super, super important. Now, you and I have actually talked about this, and I love the fact that you are talking about how, certain people gravitate towards certain things or personalities based on their sun, moon, and rising. And I am wondering, like, how is it that somebody can know the energies that are going on for them, and how can it help them?
Ooh, really great question, because this is the part where I'm always trying to encourage people to pay attention to what's actually going on right now and how that relates to themselves. Because I think a lot of people just think about their own birth chart, which is a great thing. You can spend your whole life uncovering your birth chart. But what about the transits? So the transits are, where are the planets now and how are they relating to your sort of planned out cycles? So we think about astrology as patterns. So we can look at astrology as if it is like a grandfather clock, and there are all these different gears which are moving at different speeds. And so these are the planets, which we know the distance of how long they take to rotate around the sun. And when we are looking at these in astrology, we're saying, like, when do these gears sort of match up with other ones? Is that like a rare occurrence? Does it only happen every 15 years? In this case, it's like, okay, there's a cycle now that's beginning. And what does this cycle mean for me? And I think the best way to explain that in astrology is by looking at the houses of the chart. Because when you were born, you started your clock at a different moment than everyone else, but the clock is still going for everyone, but your moment is just slightly different. And so this is where, like, generationally, there are certain groups of people who have different purposes at one period, right? Because they were all born during this cycle, which gives them something to be useful when it happens again, right? They're like familiar with it, or they're able to handle it. We have these in personal things as well. And when we look at the house placement, the house is this domain of your life. And this is dividing up all these 12 different signs in your chart. Let's say, like, I'm a Gemini rising. That means my first house is Gemini. So every year when the sun is in Gemini, I know that for me, the sun is moving through my first house, which is my like physical appearance, my like identity and how I view myself, right? And so, because that's the first thing we start with in the chart, is always the physical, the body, the appearance, and the lens in which we view the world. For me, it's about checking in with those cycles every year. What happened this time last year? Every year when we're in Gemini season, what is it like for you? Because the sun is moving through that part of your life, and it does it every year consecutively, right? These are things where we can pay attention to the patterns of ourselves. And when we understand what the planets represent or what their energies are, then we also know, Mars is also in the same sign. So what does Mars is also moving through my first house? What does that also bring to my appearance and the way I view the world and my identity? When we're paying attention to these things and the signs that the planets are in, especially like, let's say they're in a retrograde, or let's say we just had the new moon and there was Mars, Mercury in retrograde, and the sun were all in Libra. It was so much Libra energy. It's like, well, where is Libra in my chart, right? What area of my life is going through all of this? And so we know generally the consciousness is going through Libra energy. That's easy to explain. Libra is about relationships and things like this, right? So we know collectively that this is going on, but what about in my life? Like, how is this cycle this year during Libra season different than last year? And what did I experience last year and how has it changed this year? This is where we start to understand, and this is how we have built astrology. It's been studying what happens over and over and over repeatedly. We're studying patterns from all sides of the world, from all different cultures who have been watching the stars and the planets, all coming together and agreeing that these energies bring these things.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Like Mercury retrograde, we didn't just make it up and be like, oh, Mercury retrograde is like, makes technology go wonky. Well, we've been watching for a long time, and it just so happens that it does do that.
Right. Absolutely. And actually we're gonna cover that in a little bit, the whole retrograde thing, because I do want to spend a little bit of time discussing that so people really understand what that means. We will be right back with the Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. But I do have a quick question because you and I have talked about this many times. And okay, so I'm a Pisces sun, so I am not particularly grounded in that way for my sun sign. So when I look at astrology and when you start talking about the houses and everything else, like my brain kind of explodes. I'm just kind of like, okay, I get it. Like I understand it. But then when I have to go back and look at it and say, okay, so let's say Pisces, it's Pisces season. And so that's in my first house. So then if you're talking about Libra, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, how do I figure out where Libra is in the next house? And so does it just go in order of the houses? So like if you're Pisces, then it just sort of goes in order. But how does that work exactly when you're trying to figure out your houses?
So the houses, the whole chart begins at the ascendant. So your rising sign is the beginning of your chart. So you're also a Gemini rising like me.
Right.
And so your chart begins, your first house is Gemini. So in that case, then they go in order. So after Gemini is Cancer, and then you go in the same order. So we would know that your 12th house is the sign before Gemini, would be Taurus. So you can pretty quickly, if you know the order of the signs,
right.
If you know someone's rising, you can tell the general area what part of their life that the sun is moving through, or any planet is moving through the sun. So the planet in your birth chart is like the state of consciousness. It's like the psychological function. So when we're asking where Libra is, we're not asking like what planets you have in Libra. We're asking more like where in your chart is the house that Libra is fully covering, basically.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense then. Okay, great.
And if you do have a planet in Libra, that will be important to know, because that means like the sun in Libra season at one point is crossing over that part of your psyche, which is in Libra.
Right.
Right. So like if your moon is in Libra and the sun is going to move over your moon in Libra, well, that's the new moon, by the way, because that's when the sun and the moon align. So you're having your own sun and moon connecting on during the new moon. So this is a powerful moment for you, for like a big manifestation of a new cycle with how you feel about yourself, because your moon is your feelings and your subconscious and your daily habits due to your subconscious, right? The things that you're doing habitually without realizing it. And so the sun is always the center. It's your heart in astrology because it's the center of our solar system. And so it's also the center of your heart in the chart. And when we're looking at when the sun is moving through part of your chart, we see it as just like the light is being shown on it, right? It's giving purpose and light and pain. We're bringing attention to this part of your life. The sun during this season is sort of activating and bringing light and purpose to this aspect of you and how you were born and like what this brings out in you. And how can it improve, or what is it giving you the opportunity to learn, basically.
Right. That's amazing. One of the things that I love about astrology is how you can actually look back after the fact and see how the various energies have either helped you, or maybe if you weren't paying attention, how maybe I should have paid attention and had a heads up. My question to you is, from a real world perspective, can you give me a little story of how knowing the energies have helped you in the past?
Well, I can first tell you how fun it is to do what you just said, is to go back and find these cycles, because that's basically how we predict, is by going back, right? That just makes sense. Is how can we predict the future? We have to go back and see what happened before. So that's usually when our mind is a bit blown and we're like, what? Especially when you were unaware, because you realize that you don't have to do anything, to be honest, because you realize that you're a part of this like big picture that's happening anyway, and it's happening for you. And so if you were to know it, you might resist it, right? Or you might also, and so, or block it, or you might try to go for something else, which you can totally do. But I think like the more I've learned about it, you can get sort of wrapped up in the transits. You're going to go, someone might go, oh my God, what does it mean if like, sun is crossing over my south node, like what's going to happen? It only but something like this is going to happen once a year. So it's like, we can look what happens every year. And then that gives you a nice heads up about accepting the things that are going on and living in the present moment. I think that's the trickiest part, and what I want to be coaching people on the most is that astrology is not like determining all these things that are going to happen to you. It's allowing you to see how things have been going and how you can actually like learn the lesson you've probably been guided to learn every time this happens by simply accepting that it happens every year, or it's a part of the pattern that you've chosen.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like when you were talking about the patterns and the cycles that you're looking at in astrology, and that goes hand in hand with our life purpose and our life lessons and everything else. And so if you can identify those, and if astrology can help you do that, then you might actually work through these lessons quicker. And then when you come through these cycles, they're not going to be as intense.
You don't even notice them. That's the part where I realized, I had all these transits, which look so big. And then at the end, I'm like, yeah, I didn't really feel those. And it's like, because you were aware, they weren't just knocking you all over the place. You were just allowing yourself to sit and see what happens. And it didn't need to be so intense because you were doing what you were supposed to do. And all you're supposed to do is just accept your current situation. That's it. So if you are showing up and you're doing that, then there's no need for all these things to be so intense to get you to pay attention when you're already paying attention. When we look at astrology, like we look at a chart, it literally looks like a lens. And so that's just all it is. It's like a snapshot. It's like a picture of the certain cycle and energy that you're in and what you were born into this certain cycle. And I had this revelation during Virgo season. We just went through Virgo, and Virgo is significant in my own chart because it is my fourth house. So that the fourth house is the bottom angle. So it's holding up your entire chart, right? The base and the foundation holds up the rest. And my south node is at 0 degrees there in Virgo. And so the south node is this accumulation of your past lives. And I'm sure you know so much about this. So you work with these Akashic records and these past life readings. So I found that this is such an important part of the chart, actually, this south node. And mine being in Virgo meant that like there was a lot of karma and things from this Virgo energy. And so this year, of course, it was in Virgo season that I had the revelation about Virgo. It's like, oh, I, I understand Virgo now. Like, I get it. And I think Virgo is such an important part of everyone's chart because it is like it's the reality. It is the human experience. Virgo is the human experience in all of us, which is why on the other side of that is Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac, which is transcendence and transcending all your karma. So you start at the reality, which is the 3D and right now and what you are experiencing, what you actually feel with your body, not just physically because it is an earth sign, so it's physical things, but also intuitively because it's ruled by Mercury. So Virgo is not only sensing its current reality, it's also sensing all these other realities that are like, what? And he doesn't know, just feels them in the body and doesn't know what they are. And so that journey for everyone is this journey of reality and sensing everything, but adapting and like rising above, which is where we arrive at Pisces. And so the way I had this visual that I'm like standing in a stream and all of us, the Virgo in us is standing in our stream, okay? Because Virgo likes to pick things out that don't belong. It likes to clean up things in all of us. This is the Virgo energy, and we all have it. And so in all of us, this part of us is looking down the stream, and we see the stream as our life path. The stream is the life path. And so there are going to be things coming down through your stream, which are already planned to come down, right? You chose this. But the Virgo in you is in the reality. It's in the stream. It's intense. The water is touching your body. It feels so real. And you see this thing coming down and you're like, oh my God, no, what is this doing here? And you're trying to pick it up, right? You're like in this reality, it's too much. And you're either trying to clean it and you're trying to pull these things out, but you have nowhere to put it also because you're just standing in the stream. Like, where are you going to put it? You're going to eventually, it just might take a long time, but you're going to end up putting it back in the water.
Right.
Go, oh, now it's gone. As soon as I put it in the water, like it gets carried away. Like, why was I holding on to it? And then you also, I think a lot of people, the goal is not to clean up the river. It's to move yourself out of that reality to a perspective which is moving up higher so that you can actually see the entire stream. And then you go, oh, those things need to be in the stream because those things all play a part in an entire system, which is also Virgo's doing. It's like, Virgo needs to see how the whole system flows. That's why Virgo needs like routine and stuff. But the thing is, you don't find this routine. It's already perfectly done. It's already perfect. And so it's just because you're in that intense reality that you have this narrow, this close perspective of what's coming up ahead. But if you can actually rise up and see the entire stream, this is actually like the point of astrology. This is where you're actually looking at the whole stream. You're looking at the whole life path. You're looking at the purpose of all these cycles and you're going, oh, okay, yeah, I don't need to go down into the stream and adjust anything. I just need to be up here in this perspective where I can just see how it's all working out and how it's supposed to be this way.
That is the most beautiful analogy I have ever heard in regards to astrology. Thank you so much for that. That was great.
I've been meaning to share that. It was a revelation. It came to me in like a visual, and I think I explained it once or twice and was like, yeah, this is a lot easier to understand.
Absolutely it is. We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio.
And you can also get into this duality because as well in astrology, nothing is black and white. Everything is a spectrum, which is why Virgo to Pisces is a journey. You're not just Virgo here and Pisces there. It's the entire journey of Virgo to Pisces. It's the journey from the reality to the transcendence. And when you have Pisces, there are two ways to get out of that reality. You either rise above, which is the transcending, and you seeing the whole picture and saying, it's okay, I surrender, I let it do it the way it is. Or you try to escape that reality by dipping below the river, maybe, that might be doing drugs or doing other things in your life, which sort of pull you out of that intense reality. So there are basically the shadow and the light of Pisces. Either you rise above or you dip below. And so we have that in all of us, those aspects of us exist. And so what's interesting to see is where in that chart for you is Pisces in that journey of Virgo to Pisces. And so where you might have Pisces, you want to check in with yourself and say, in this area of my life, am I rising above or am I trying to escape? And that's where you can really improve your life, is by actually taking the time to look at that and say, you know what? For me, it's my North Node, it's my destiny, and it's in my 10th house, which is career. And I spend a lot of my life avoiding, it's like, I've definitely tried to escape it so many times. And so, or this public image, right? And so this is where you can check in and you can actually improve your life by being aware. This is where I have Pisces. Okay. Which way or how far am I on the spectrum? Where am I at right now? And then accepting that.
And that's something that you and I have talked about as well, which is that avoidance. And, when you actually face something head on, it's not so bad. And you realize that, oh, hey, I'm actually kind of good at this. Or, hey, I can actually do this. It's not that difficult. A lot of times it is about just overcoming your own fears, right?
Definitely. I think the entire point of all of it is really about just being so present in this moment. And If you are not, then you're thinking about either the future or the past. And the best part about that is that as soon as you realize, oh, but here's my present moment now, and you just experience it or you just witness it. Sometimes I just say, I'm just a witness, and that
Yes.
I'm just witnessing what this feels like, or I'm witnessing what this experience is. And as soon as you do that, you are in your complete truth. There's
Right.
no like the chart and all the astrology and all these other things. This is one story. This is one lifetime you've had out of many. So it's good to understand the patterns that you've chosen, but it's a story. It's part of the future and it's part of the past. But the truth is really the true you, and the point of who you are and your point of power is just saying, I have all that, but I'm just here to witness it right now.
With all of that being said, when we talk about getting a reading and that sort of thing, and you've done my charts, and I remember just sort of laughing because you were so knowledgeable and I am so not when it comes to astrology. So I remember you explaining something to me and I was like, okay, I think I get it, but I'm not sure. And then now the way that you're explaining this, I definitely want to go back and look at my Virgo too, because now that you've explained it this way, I now want to know more about my Virgo and where it's placed. That's where, like, when you get a reading, I'm going to actually go back and listen to the recording that you and I had, and I can have sort of a better or deeper understanding about what some of those things mean. It's not just about knowing what the energies are in this moment. Like you said, you can go back and, listen or read or whatever the medium is, and have a better understanding of what you were going through in the past. It's such a beautiful cyclical way of understanding how your life is going, what is happening, and why you are currently in this present moment going through what you're going through.
Exactly. Right. So we're not trying to make these major predictions. We're not trying to control our lives by saying, I think a lot of people tend to steer towards that direction. Like a lot of people might see an astrologer to say, well, when should I get married, or when will I meet my soulmate? Trying to predict the timing for that. And like, yeah, we can see those things. We can see when pattern and cycle wise, there's a way more open energy for starting a family than, in this period. But it's really about just understanding that and not trying to take control or like necessarily waiting for the cycle to happen. It's like just getting the grand picture and pulling out the things that are actually resonating. So I think as well, when you're looking to get a reading with an astrologer, it depends on what you are actually wanting to know, because we can go and open any door. Like there are infinite amounts of doors and ways, things we can look into in astrology. And it won't matter if it's not that time in your life where you're supposed to know those things. So if I'm getting a client or I'm doing a reading and someone hasn't had their Saturn return yet, there's almost no point in talking to them about like their career and all these things that come after your Saturn return, right? Like when you've had this moment where you take responsibility, where you find out where your boundaries are and you commit to something, it's almost like you could go and like do this whole reading about it, but then there's something missing, or it won't relate to them at the time. And then like maybe after they have the Saturn return, they're like, oh, everything you said was true. Well, yes, because it was coming, but you weren't ready or able to understand it at the time anyway. So I think that it's always great to have some kind of intention when you're getting a reading. I would say if you are getting a reading, it's best the more information you can give to your astrologer, the better, because otherwise your astrologer might just give you a very basic reading. This is your birth chart. And you're like, yeah, I already have read that on the internet. I already know, like, on these things. But if you can really like get into about this is happening in my life, or these are the changes that are going on, or like this is how I've started, this is what I've been experiencing, then we can really look and go so much deeper and help you understand like why that's happening, what the purpose of that is, you know, and we can go back and we can really like understand it, where you don't just feel like you just had this big explanation about astrology, but you're like, oh, okay. You know, it's like, how can we really understand you and your cycle and what you're experiencing now? And then how can we also move out of the astrology of that, right? Out of the technical stuff and more into the spirituality stuff and the growth part.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We have come to that point in time where we are going to talk about retrogrades. So I wanted this to be a topic, and this is going to date the episode a little bit. Obviously, we're recording this in the beginning of October. This episode is not going to air until likely November, December. But, you know, every year we have between 3 and 4 Mercury retrogrades, and it's become a bit of a common vernacular that people say nowadays, where, you know, if technology goes out or anything is happening with miscommunication, people are like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde, you know? And I've known people who literally won't do things because it's Mercury retrograde. So some people take it super seriously, and some people just kind of, you know, colloquially say something like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde, just because it sounds like something that they need to say if technology goes wrong. But I know, and especially from talking to you, I know that retrogrades have a much bigger impact on our lives, because it's not just Mercury, it's all the planets who can go into retrograde at various different times. And I kind of want your take on what retrogrades are and what those mean for us in our charts, in our lives.
Glad you asked, because I think, yeah, it has become a sort of a joke or a meme or something to blame things on. But it's actually, so I think retrogrades are the most important times of our cycles for everyone, for the whole collective consciousness, not necessarily for our own transits, but mostly for what all of us are going through. And it's because everything is from the Earth's perspective. So the planets are not actually like moving backwards. Like, no, you know, like our planets don't just like stop and be like, hold up, you know, like, let me go back. But from our perspective on Earth, which is astrology, we're doing everything from our viewpoint. And from our viewpoint, it appears to us that the planets are moving back through the degrees in their travel time around the sun. And so during that period, if the planets are all representing our psychological functions or our states of consciousness, which is what they are, these are different states of consciousness, different states of awareness. The planet, which is going into retrograde, it's almost like it's leaving us to do it for ourselves. It's almost like it's taking a break. It's like, okay, you do it now. You have all the tools. You know, we've went through all the degrees with you. We moved through these degrees. And now, like, it's going to move back. And during those degrees that you already went through, it wants you to do it without the assistance of the planet. So
wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a time to shine. It's like, show up, you know? And like, that's why we think Mercury, nothing's working right. And it's like, yeah, because you need to make sure you're communicating. You need to take the steps to be clear, right? Like, it's your time to show up and activate your own state of awareness when it comes to communication and speech and networking and your siblings, which are all the things that Mercury rules.
And I do know that when Mercury is in retrograde, let's say, and every planet has its own light side and shadow side, if you will. And so the shadow side of Mercury retrograde is obviously our communication going wonky, and communication, email, technology, everything like breaking down. But the light side of Mercury retrograde is a time to clean house, to go within, to clean up the things that are in your life that you no longer need. So that is what you can use Mercury retrograde to in your advantage. So can you kind of talk about some of the other advantages you can use during retrogrades?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's really about review. So the things that you do notice that come up, it's for you to go, oh, that thing is not well, right? You don't have to necessarily make the adjustment during the retrograde. It's more for you to actually go back and be like, oh, that doesn't work really well. That is definitely not working well because it's literally broken. Or I'm in a fight with someone, or this person just appeared out of nowhere. And so the reason why with Mercury that it gets so much popularity is because it is one of our more personal planets. And so it affects us so much more like in our state of awareness of reality and consciousness. This is because it's the planet that's closest to the sun as well. So it's also like heavily energized. And this is why like we really see a lot of things break down, but the breakdowns are where we get the breakthrough. So what the best thing you could be doing during a retrograde is actually maybe journaling and taking note of the things that are not working that normally do, or the argument and what you're having it about, or the person who's come back in your life all of a sudden. Like, what is all of that giving to you in order to move forward, not to like fix whatever it is, but moving forward, how are you improving your communication? How are you improving this networking, or how are you improving these things? And so obviously some things are out of our control. Like if Facebook goes down, like it's giving you the opportunity. You're not meant to like review like all of social media and all of that. Like, yeah, you can think about that if you want to, but the retrograde is not happening so that you have to like fix Facebook, right? Just like if your ex comes back, it's not so that you fix your relationship with your ex. It's so that you refocus your energy and you take the time to like review maybe what that means to you. So, you know, like if you go back and you look back at all your patterns, you say, oh, well, this is my pattern. So this is actually another piece of information about my pattern. And how do I want to use that moving forward when the retrograde is over, for example? So I would say
interesting.
It's always good for reflection, but there are certain planets that go into retrograde for like half the year. We just don't, we don't pay attention because they're affecting our entire consciousness. Like Pluto just went out of retrograde and it's been in retrograde for like 6 months. And like nobody knows about it because it's so far away from us too. It's the furthest planet from the sun. So it's like, well, is it really affecting us? And it's like, well, Pluto is a pretty intense part of our psyche. It's our transformative power. It's our ability to like purge and destruct what is fake and bad, and then like give us the power to like rise up like the phoenix, you know, like that's a pretty intense part of our psyche.
And that's a pretty important part of it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also affecting the entire consciousness. It's a pattern for the whole world to be going through, right? It's less of a personal planet, like we say, because Mercury, Mars, and Venus, I think Jupiter as well, are kind of more of the personal planets, which are definitely affecting more of your everyday psyche, right? Like Mercury is your communication, and Mars is your action and your ego, and Venus is your values and the things that you attract. So these things are more of our present states of awareness in our reality, like in a more personal level, whereas the planets which are further away are affecting like the entire consciousness and maybe what we're seeing around us in society and things like that. So while these further away planets are in retrograde, it's like society's turn to sort of like do it on our own as well. Like it's like Pluto took a break. And so usually we see the biggest shifts when any planet goes into retrograde. That's when we like feel the shift the most, because it's like, whoa, like where'd you go? You know, we like pick up on that difference. And then also when it goes back to direct, the planet is like, I'm back. This is when we kind of feel the difference. We're like, oh, it's, you know, we have some more assistance again. It's almost like things get easier, or like things, I wouldn't say get easier, but they sort of start working out for us in a way. So like when we think about Pluto and transformation, it might be like the thing that you've been dealing with or struggling with, or society has been struggling with to like transform and get rid of, might suddenly like get just purged for us. You know, it might just be like Pluto's like, okay, I'm doing it, you know, let me just take that out. No need for that. So, but we were being asked to do it ourselves. We were being asked to be in that use that state of consciousness or use that state of awareness to do Pluto's job, if that makes sense.
That's really fascinating that it's almost as if like they're giving us the training wheels. The universe is giving us the training wheels for certain portions of time, and then they take the training wheels away, and then we're like, what's happening?
Mm-hmm. It's like, you got this, you know everything. And that's when we also look at the degrees. This is going to be a great segue.
We will be right back with the Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio.
That's when we look at the degrees about like of what degrees the retrograde is going through. Because if we look at the degrees as steps, like each sign has 30 degrees. So it's like we have to go through all 30 steps for each sign. And so what we notice.
So that's what degrees means then. It's like, so each sign has 30 degrees and you have to go through each.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fascinating. Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah. So the planets are all just moving in a circle around the sun. And so some planets take a really long time to move 1 degree because they're super far away from the sun. But the way we do the calendar is we're revolving around the sun. So that's why 360 degrees, right? It takes us about a degree to move around the sun a day, about a degree a day in that case. So it depends on where in the hemisphere you are, but we do the zodiac calendar in that way because we are planning the entire year around our rotation around the sun. And so,
interesting.
Yeah. So in that sense, we look at the steps into which the retrograde will take place, because we've had, let's say, the movement Mercury retrograde in Libra. We look at Libra, I think it went retrograde at 15 degrees, if I'm not wrong. And so that means that Mercury went through the first 15 degrees of Libra. So when it's going back, we know that those first 15 degrees are what we are being asked to like do on our own. So if we can look back at the beginning where Mercury was in Libra, that especially would be helpful for us to see, okay, what are we working through when Mercury is in Libra, and how can we hold the reins together right now without Mercury? It's like a spiritual test all the time, you know?
Well, everything always is, right? I mean, everything, but this is giving you a different level and understanding of how the universe works with us and helps us in that way. That's really, really beautiful. So if you were to take, let's say, where we are right now and the degrees and the planet setup and everything, and if you had all of the degrees mapped out of all of the planets and everything, and you have, let's say, a fixed chart of your signs and where you were born and when, could you sort of superimpose them and then you could kind of see where things are in your degrees? Is that how it works? Because I've always wondered how that translate to your charts. I've heard astrologers say, you know, if they're doing general astrology readings on YouTube or something like that, they're like, oh, if you want to know how this is affecting you, then take a look at where blah, blah, blah degrees are in your chart. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. So like, I have no idea how to figure out, okay, so you're reading the energies now, and then how do you figure out where it is in your own chart?
So that would be pulling like a transits chart. So it's exactly what you said. It's taking a snapshot of the degrees that all the planets are in now and superimposing your birth chart inside that so that you can see how close the sun is to your sun or to whatever part in your chart at the degree. So we know like the new moon is new when the moon and the sun are at the same degree. And so it's what degree are they meeting at? And then you can look at in your chart, you would look in the house for that sign and see where in the degree, because it's going to be 30 degrees for everything. So you would know the area of your life where the new moon is conjuncting, right? Where they're lining up. And so for you, that would tell you, we know new moons are about new cycles for a month, about how you feel about your subconscious and your heart aligning. So that's why we manifest, because we need your subconscious and we need your heart. And so when those two things come together, we can create. And so you would see the actual degree you can estimate, you can say, okay, like Libra, the new moon was in Libra, my fifth house is Libra. But if you're not using whole signs, because some astrologers use Placidus and whole signs, so basically that's just, whole sign would just be like the entire house is only one sign. But in Placidus, it would depend on actually the degree, the number degree in which your chart starts. So like my ascendant is like 5 degrees Mercury. So my actual chart begins at 5. So the whole house is not exactly all Gemini. Part of my first house also has Cancer.
That makes sense, right? Because you're shifting the entire chart.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can you define for the listeners then what a transit actually is? Because you have used this term several times throughout the podcast, and I just want to make sure that the listeners know what that means.
Totally. So a transit is actually just where the planet is now in relation to where it is moving. We say moving through your chart. So we know that the sun is transiting. That just means that we're going through, we're in Scorpio. So let's say we're moving through Scorpio season. So the transit would be the sun is transiting whatever house you have Scorpio in your birth chart.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that definition, because I wanted to make sure people understood what you meant when you were saying transiting. So
yeah, transit is just current planet placement versus
okay, great.
The stuck placement of where it was when you were born.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So I have a couple of fun questions for you. What is your favorite retrograde?
Maybe Jupiter. I like Jupiter retrograde because Jupiter in our psyche, or Jupiter in astrology, is like our morals and our beliefs and the part of us that encourages us to follow our dreams. And so that's why a lot of people consider Jupiter as like the planet of fortune. It's not actually the planet of fortune. It just gives you the positivity and the like optimism to go for it. And then when you go for it, you end up having like good luck, or you have fortune because you went for it.
Yeah.
And so I think when Jupiter goes in retrograde, I think it also affects more than just our personal psyches. I think it also influences a lot of the population as well. I think it's probably the most valuable, is that time for us to really check in and see where our morals and ethics and beliefs lie, and how we can like encourage ourselves to be more optimistic or follow through with what we believe in. I think that that's just probably the most valuable. I don't know if it's the easiest, but I also think that in astrology, like the harder the transit or the more difficult the aspect or the angle that planets are making, the more character, the more potential there is for you. And I just discussed that with my friend, who there's a lot of people who like can look at astrology from a fear-based viewpoint. It happens a lot, especially with the app like CoStar, if you're familiar with it. I tell everyone I know to like delete it because it's very fear-based. It's very like, oh, like they send you these updates that don't actually mean anything. They're just using an algorithm, and they're not even actually like using your astrology, but they're very fear-based. And a lot of people will tell me that their day was ruined based off like the update they got from their co-star. And I'm like, then delete it. It should only be adding to your life. It should not be like making you suffer or like putting you in paranoia. Like that is not what it's for.
And that goes for pretty much anything. That goes for any astrology reading. That goes for any horoscope. That goes for any reading you get from any psychic. It doesn't matter who it is. If the message is not uplifting and helping you in your life, then you just leave it. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to get challenging information.
Right.
There's a difference, because you can get challenging information, which may be something you don't want to hear, but it's there for you to learn, and it's there for you to really look into your heart to see if this is something you really need to work on.
Exactly.
And if it is something that is completely fear-based, as you're saying, just warning you that like this XYZ is going to happen and you have zero control over it, yeah, delete, unsubscribe and walk away, because that is not part of what this journey is about.
100%. And I think that's the gray area when it comes to the spiritual community as well. So there's a difference between what am I afraid of because it's unsafe or because like this is like danger, or where's the fear that I'm supposed to actually like lean into, right? To like get where I'm going, because your ego is always trying to keep you in the same place. So sometimes the fear seems really real, right? But it's actually just there to get you to stay where you're at. Whereas there's another element to where like maybe you're actually in danger and you need to like listen to this thing, right? But so there's a gray area with that. And I think a lot of people, when they get into astrology, they sort of start to focus on these like negative or the shadow thing. And they look at it as something to avoid or like deny or suppress, or they don't want to see it. And the power of your entire alchemy and growth is actually focusing on those things, those difficult aspects, right? Like in a birth chart, if you have a 90-degree angle, we call that a square, and we call that a hard aspect because there's tension. These two states of awareness are in a tense angle. And a lot of people look at that and they go, oh my God, like this person has all these squares, like, oh, I don't know if I want to be with them, or, and it's like, well, it's going to depend on the person, on how self-aware they are and how they work through these challenges. Because the people who have been born with the most challenges are usually the ones who are the strongest and have the most character.
Right.
And so it's not just looking at what's on the chart. It's like, how does the person work with what's in the chart?
Like you said earlier, whether or not this person actually rises above and moves through these challenges, or do they curl up in a ball and start using vices and things like that to avoid the lessons they're supposed to learn.
Exactly. And so all of this is just about becoming aware of what you have to work with and how you have in the past and how you will in the future work with those things, work with those aspects of yourself. Are you going to choose the shadow, or are you going to choose the light?
Right.
In every situation, in every new moment. And the more you study the pattern, the easier it is. But it's really just about being aware. And astrology is a tool for awareness.
Perfect. We will be right back with the Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. What is your favorite planet or star?
Oh, I would also say Jupiter, I think, or maybe Venus. Both of those we call in classic astrology benefic planets, because those tend to have more positive influence. But if you think about it, both are really related to our values. And so I think that looking at the placements that they're in is also beneficial to see like how the expression is. I have both of mine in Gemini. So both my Jupiter and Venus are in Gemini in my first house. So I think all of these planets are also prominent in my personality, which is maybe why I relate to them a lot.
Right.
But we can also see them from the sky. And I don't know if you've noticed Jupiter over the past few months, but it's been super bright. And so I just caught myself always being like looking at the sky and being like, oh, hey, Jupiter, like, hey. And no, I see Jupiter as, I like to give the planets like personas. It helps me a lot to understand what their energies are. I wanted to make like some cool videos about it. I just never got around to it. But I see Jupiter as like our cool, like hippie aunt who's like, go for it. Like, I'm just going to like write you the check. You go like do your thing and like you go explore, or like just encourages you to do it and like gives you the tools to go for it. Regardless of maybe you might overlook something important. It's just kind of like, that's the shadow side of Jupiter, is we overlook things. We get like a little bit too optimistic and we kind of like miss an important detail.
Sure.
But in general, it's kind of like that cool, fun aunt who's rich, who's like, here, I believe in you, like that's a great idea. Here, go do it. And this is that feminine energy, that yin energy that is like, I'm just going to allow it to come to me by knowing that I'm worth it. And so I love that energy as well. Like, I think it's powerful. And I think that it also helps us a lot to understand the kinds of things we're attracting in our lives. So that can also give you a lot of introspect, a lot of insight about the kinds of people you are meeting, the kinds of events happening in your life, the kind of social life that you have, the kind of house that you have, all these things. Like, if you take a look at the Venus in your chart, it's going to really open up your world to what your values are and how you are actually attracting them into your life or not.
Yeah. And how you're manifesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you tell the listeners if they would like to book an astrology session with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Amazing. So on my Instagram, everything is available there. It's Discover Every Corner, all one word. I have, all the links there to go to do a session, but you can also go to discovereverycorner.com. Pretty simple. And I do offer like sessions which are complete with astrology, and I also pull tarot cards. They're pretty comprehensive. There's also a questionnaire too. So like I said earlier in the show, like, it's great if you really you have something you really want to get into, like maybe what you're experiencing or what's going on. It's going to give you a much more comprehensive reading than just, I've never had a reading, which is also fine. If you've never had a reading, we can start very general. But I think it's great to have readings which are not just the same thing every year. Maybe you can get one during the year, which is just like the basis of like who you are, what maybe your purpose in this life is, which is great starting point, the general picture. And then as things start to unfold and you are experiencing this purpose and these cycles, to really like dive in and go at a deeper level. I think that would be my best suggestion.
Fantastic. Now, the biggest question is, and I'm sort of putting you on the spot here, you also live in Paris, and do you do these sessions in French as well?
I can't promise that my metaphors will be as good because I don't know all we don't have the same expressions all the time. I really like to bring my work and astrology down to earth so that it's not too technical, and try to relate and make the connections based off of what we actually know and experience and see around us. But yes, I can do them in French, and they're honestly better in person. So if anyone is in Paris, it's so much better to get the reading in person. We can do the cards together. You can ask questions. You can like maybe be more involved in it. I think it's also very nice. And I do also offer half-day retreats as well. So if people are in the same vicinity, I do like a full 4-hour session, which is in person. And we do like an activity which helps you connect to your chart. And it's a lot more one-on-one. And I also do bonding sessions. So I can do a session between a couple, or I do a lot of mother-daughter sessions. So it's about bringing these two people, understanding their two purposes and why they're together in this lifetime, and how each of them can teach the lessons naturally to each other that they came here to learn through this person, and fulfill the purpose that they came here to fulfill as well, while also understanding what makes them different and what makes them united and the same. And I can do this in a personal setting as well, where I'm actually customizing an activity which I see in the charts would help them to bond and make this connection together based off what's in their charts.
And that is such a beautiful experience. I have had an in-person reading with Tamara, and it is fantastic. And I do know that her clients, the people that she has done these sessions for, these bonding sessions, and you go to some iconic, beautiful place in Paris, and you're able to really experience the nature and the place where you're in, and it's all tied in with the astrology. It's such a perfect experience. So I highly encourage you to check out Tamara. Discover Every Corner is her social media as well as her website. Tamara, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much, Annette.
Please join us next week for episode 15, when we are going to be talking about transcending duality. It's going to be a pretty hot topic, so definitely join us next week. I want to thank Paris Underground Radio for producing this episode. And please go over and give them some love at Facebook and Instagram, Paris Underground Radio, as well as listen to other wonderful Parisian podcasts made by expats for expats, as well as for anybody else in the world. And you can find all of those podcasts on anywhere you listen to podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. And you can also listen to all of the episodes at parisundergroundradio.com. Again, my name is Annette Delou. I am your host for The Heart of You. You can reach me at all social media at Infinite Soul Love 1111. Thank you so much and have an amazing day.